Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, there is a story that begins with silence, a silence that has lasted much longer than anyone expected. Somewhere, in the quiet hours before sunrise, your soulmate finds themselves unable to ignore the thoughts that have been returning again and again. They have tried convincing themselves that time would make everything easier, that unanswered questions would eventually fade, and that the emotions they carried would slowly lose their intensity. Instead, something unexpected happened. The more they tried to move forward without facing those feelings, the stronger those feelings became. This morning they woke before the first light touched the horizon, their mind already racing with memories they thought had been left behind. They sat beside a window watching the sky gradually brighten, wondering why certain moments refused to disappear. None of those memories were dramatic. They remembered ordinary conversations, shared laughter, quiet encouragement during difficult seasons, and simple acts of kindness that seemed insignificant at the time. Yet now, each memory carried a meaning they had never fully understood before. They quietly whispered to themselves, "Why do these moments still matter so much?" Unable to remain inside, they decided to take a long walk through the town. The streets were peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of a new day beginning. A bakery opened its doors, filling the air with the comforting scent of fresh bread. A florist carefully arranged flowers outside the shop while greeting every passerby with a genuine smile. An elderly neighbor waved cheerfully to a young family rushing toward school, reminding your soulmate that warmth often appears in the smallest interactions. As they continued walking, they stopped at a small cafe where something simple yet unforgettable unfolded before their eyes. A young employee accidentally dropped an entire tray of breakfast orders onto the floor. For a brief moment the room fell silent. Embarrassment covered the employee's face as they hurried to apologize. Before anyone could complain, an older customer calmly stood, smiled kindly, and helped gather the broken dishes. Another customer offered napkins while someone else reassured the employee that everyone makes mistakes. Within moments the tension disappeared, replaced by laughter and understanding. Watching that scene, your soulmate felt something shift inside. They realized that compassion has a remarkable ability to transform difficult moments into opportunities for grace. As they left the cafe, they found themselves thinking about you. They remembered times when you responded to mistakes with patience instead of criticism, when you chose understanding instead of anger, and when your quiet encouragement gave someone the confidence to try again after failure. Those memories, once overlooked, suddenly seemed incredibly important. Later that morning they wandered into a public library seeking a little more quiet. There they noticed a nervous student searching every shelf for a book needed for an important examination. Seeing the growing frustration, another visitor paused their own reading, located the missing book, and handed it over with a smile before returning to their seat without expecting recognition. The entire exchange lasted only seconds, but your soulmate couldn't stop thinking about it. Once again they remembered you. How naturally you noticed when someone needed support, how often you helped without drawing attention to yourself, and how your kindness rarely asked for anything in return. The more they reflected, the clearer one truth became. Real character reveals itself in ordinary moments, not extraordinary performances. As afternoon approached, your soulmate continued their walk through a nearby park where children laughed beneath tall trees and families shared simple picnics on the grass. Near a quiet pond, they watched a father patiently teaching his daughter how to skip stones across the water. Every unsuccessful attempt was met with gentle encouragement rather than frustration. Finally, one smooth stone danced across the surface 4 times before disappearing beneath the water, and the little girl's delighted laughter echoed across the park. Your soulmate smiled because they realized patience creates confidence far more effectively than pressure ever could. Once again your face appeared in their thoughts. They remembered conversations where you listened completely before offering advice, moments when you quietly believed in someone who had almost stopped believing in themselves, and the calm reassurance you brought into situations where everyone else felt overwhelmed. Those memories formed a pattern impossible to ignore. It was not one dramatic event that had captured their attention. It was the consistency with which you chose kindness over convenience. My child, the day continued unfolding with lesson after lesson. Passing through a local market, your soulmate noticed an elderly man struggling to carry several heavy bags. Before anyone could ask, a teenager put down his own shopping, picked up the bags, and walked beside the man all the way to the bus stop. There were no cameras, no applause, and no expectation of reward. The young man simply smiled, wished the stranger a pleasant day, and quietly continued his own journey. That simple act stayed with your soulmate because it reminded them that goodness often leaves before it receives thanks. Walking further, they passed a small community center where volunteers were preparing meals for families facing difficult times. Some chopped vegetables, others arranged tables, and several people carefully packed food into containers. Every volunteer worked with cheerful determination despite knowing most recipients would never learn their names. Watching through the doorway, your soulmate realized that some of the greatest contributions to the world are made by people whose stories remain untold. Again they thought about you. They remembered your willingness to give your time without expecting praise, the quiet generosity you offered when someone else needed encouragement, and the respect you showed to every person regardless of their position or circumstances. By late afternoon they reached a riverside path where an elderly gardener patiently watered flowers planted along a public walkway. Curious, your soulmate asked why he devoted so much energy to a garden that belonged to everyone rather than his own home. The gardener smiled and replied, "Because beauty shared with strangers is still beauty worth growing." Those words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. They understood that the most meaningful lives are often built upon countless small decisions to make someone else's day a little brighter. As the sun slowly began to set, they found a quiet bench overlooking the river. The water reflected golden light while birds glided peacefully across the surface. There, surrounded by calm, they finally admitted something they had been avoiding for far too long. The reason they felt such urgency was not because of a mysterious event or an impossible sign. It was because they had finally recognized how deeply they admired the quiet strength found in ordinary goodness. They realized that people spend so much time searching for extraordinary moments that they often overlook extraordinary character. Returning home that evening, they opened a notebook and began writing everything they had witnessed throughout the day. They filled page after page describing the compassionate customer at the cafe, the helpful stranger in the library, the patient father in the park, the generous teenager at the market, the dedicated volunteers, and the gardener planting beauty for people he would never meet. Then they wrote about you. They described your honesty, your patience, your gratitude, your calm spirit, your compassion, and your quiet consistency. The more they wrote, the more emotional they became because every memory revealed the same truth. What they had been trying to ignore was not fading, it was becoming impossible to overlook. Looking toward the digital clock across the room, they noticed 11:11 glowing softly. Earlier they had smiled after receiving receipt number 222, and during the afternoon they had passed a building displaying 444 above its entrance. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as gentle reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate smiled and quietly asked themselves, "Have I appreciated the people whose kindness has quietly changed my life? Have I allowed fear to keep meaningful words unspoken? Have I become someone whose everyday choices leave others feeling seen, valued, and encouraged?" Those questions lingered long after darkness settled outside the window. Before closing the notebook, they carefully wrote one final sentence at the bottom of the page, their hand trembling slightly with emotion. "Tomorrow I will finally admit why I feel this overwhelming need to reach out, because what I discovered today has changed the way I see this connection forever." Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, your soulmate barely slept after writing those final words in the notebook. They had hoped that putting their thoughts onto paper would quiet the emotions that had been building inside them, but instead every sentence seemed to grow stronger with the passing hours. Long before sunrise they found themselves sitting beside the same window, watching the first rays of light slowly chase away the darkness. The notebook lay open on the table, and their eyes kept returning to the final line they had written. "Tomorrow I will finally admit why I feel this overwhelming need to reach out, because what I discovered today has changed the way I see this connection forever." They whispered those words aloud, and for the first time they understood that the urgency they felt was not created by fear. It was created by gratitude. They realized that too many meaningful things remain unspoken until it is too late, and they no longer wanted appreciation to become another silent thought carried only in memory. With that realization, they stepped outside, determined to pay closer attention to the world around them. The morning streets were alive with ordinary routines that now seemed extraordinary. A newspaper delivery driver carefully placed each paper where it would stay dry from the morning dew. A cafe owner greeted every customer with the same warm smile, remembering their names even during the busiest hours. A crossing guard stood patiently in the cool morning air, ensuring every child reached school safely before waving them on with encouragement. None of these people expected applause, yet each one quietly made another person's day a little easier. Your soulmate walked slowly, noticing details that had once escaped their attention. At a bus stop they watched a young professional stand up and offer a seat to an elderly passenger without hesitation. Nearby, a little girl carefully shared half of her breakfast with a stray dog before hurrying to school. Those simple acts carried no dramatic music, no audience, and no recognition, yet they revealed something profoundly important. They showed that kindness often appears when no one is looking. As your soulmate continued walking, memories of you returned once again. They remembered how naturally you thanked people whose work often went unnoticed. They remembered your habit of listening without interrupting, your willingness to remain calm when others became impatient, and your quiet way of encouraging someone who doubted themselves. Suddenly they realized those memories had never faded because they reflected something timeless. Character leaves a deeper impression than excitement ever can. Later that morning they visited a small community garden where volunteers gathered to care for flowers and vegetables grown for local families. One elderly volunteer carefully handed a watering can to a young child and patiently showed them how to care for newly planted flowers. The child smiled proudly after watering the first row, believing they had done something truly important. Watching this gentle exchange, your soulmate understood another lesson. Real influence is not about receiving admiration. It is about helping others discover their own ability to bring goodness into the world. That thought reminded them of every time you had encouraged someone instead of seeking attention for yourself. Whether through patient advice, quiet reassurance, or simply being present during difficult moments, you had consistently helped others believe they were stronger than they imagined. Those memories became impossible to ignore. By midday your soulmate wandered toward a small bookstore where a handwritten sign near the entrance read, "Take a book. Leave a book. Share a story." Curious, they stepped inside and noticed people quietly exchanging books they loved so strangers could experience them too. An elderly woman gently placed a well-worn novel onto the shelf with a handwritten note tucked inside its cover. The note read, "This story helped me through a difficult season. I hope it brings someone else comfort." Reading those words filled your soulmate with unexpected emotion because they realized hope can travel from one person to another in the simplest ways. A kind sentence. A patient conversation. A thoughtful gesture. A shared story. They thought again of you and remembered conversations that had once lifted someone's spirit when they felt discouraged. Perhaps you never realized how much those moments mattered. Perhaps you considered them too ordinary to remember. Yet your soulmate now understood that ordinary kindness often becomes another person's extraordinary memory. As the afternoon continued, they passed a small repair shop where a mechanic carefully fixed an elderly customer's wheelchair without accepting payment, quietly explaining, "Some things are more important than money." The customer tried to insist, but the mechanic simply smiled and wished them a peaceful day. Watching that scene, your soulmate paused in complete silence. They realized that integrity reveals itself through choices made when no reward is expected. Immediately they remembered the times you chose honesty even when dishonesty might have been easier, the times you kept promises despite inconvenience, and the countless occasions you remained dependable when others walked away. Those memories formed a beautiful pattern of quiet faithfulness. My child, by evening your soulmate returned to the riverside where the gentle movement of the water seemed to mirror the steady thoughts moving through their heart. They sat on the same bench as the day before and reflected on everything they had witnessed. The crossing guard protecting children. The stranger giving up a seat. The little girl feeding the stray dog. The volunteers teaching kindness through action. The woman leaving behind a hopeful note inside a book. The mechanic choosing compassion over profit. Every ordinary encounter repeated the same message: the strongest hearts rarely seek attention. They simply continue choosing goodness, one decision at a time. Looking across the river as the sun slowly disappeared beneath the horizon, your soulmate finally admitted something to themselves. The reason they felt such urgency to reach out was because they had discovered that life's greatest treasures are often the people whose quiet actions leave lasting peace in the hearts of others. They no longer wanted gratitude to remain unspoken. Returning home under a sky slowly filling with stars, they opened the notebook once again and wrote page after page describing everything they had learned that day. They wrote about each ordinary act of kindness, every conversation, every lesson, and finally they wrote about you once more. They described your patience, honesty, humility, generosity, gratitude, and the calm strength that quietly encouraged everyone fortunate enough to know you. As they rested the pen upon the final line of the page, they looked toward the clock and noticed 11:11 glowing softly once again. Earlier they had received receipt number 222, and while walking home they had passed a building displaying 444 above its entrance. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as gentle reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate smiled and allowed those moments to inspire simple questions. Have I appreciated the people who quietly changed my life? Have I expressed kindness while I still have the opportunity? Have I become someone whose ordinary choices give another person hope? Those reflections filled the room with peaceful gratitude. Before closing the notebook for the night, they carefully wrote one final sentence at the bottom of the page, knowing tomorrow would bring the most important realization of all. Now I understand why my heart refuses to remain silent, because what I truly need to share is not a secret, it is gratitude for the quiet goodness that has changed me forever. Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, your soulmate slowly opened the notebook once again, their eyes resting on the final sentence written the night before. Now I understand why my heart refuses to remain silent, because what I truly need to share is not a secret, it is gratitude for the quiet goodness that has changed me forever. Those words no longer felt like a thought, they felt like a promise. They realized that every page they had filled during the past few days had been leading them toward a single understanding. It wasn't a dramatic revelation or an unbelievable event that had stirred their hearts so deeply. It was the realization that some people quietly transform the lives of everyone around them without ever knowing it. As the morning sunlight poured through the window, they stepped outside once again, determined to notice the world with the same attention that had changed them so profoundly. The streets were beginning to fill with familiar routines. A baker carefully arranged warm loaves of bread in the display window while greeting every customer with genuine kindness. A postal worker patiently climbed the stairs of an apartment building, smiling at each resident they passed. Across the street, a young student stopped to help gather papers that had blown from an elderly teacher's bag into the wind. None of these people expected applause. None believed they were doing anything extraordinary. Yet your soulmate could no longer overlook how powerful these simple moments truly were. They understood that the strongest hearts are often the quietest ones. As they continued their walk, they reached a small bridge overlooking a peaceful river. There they noticed a young mother sitting beside her son, who looked discouraged after failing to build a small wooden model they had been working on together. Instead of expressing disappointment, she smiled gently, picked up the scattered pieces, and quietly said, "Sometimes the strongest things are built after we begin again." Those words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart because they reflected something they had been slowly learning throughout this journey. Patience does not simply help people succeed, it gives them the courage to try again. Immediately they remembered moments when you had done exactly that for others. They remembered conversations where someone felt defeated, and instead of offering criticism, you reminded them that one difficult day never defines an entire life. They remembered how you listened carefully before speaking, how you encouraged people to believe in themselves when they had almost given up, and how your calm presence often became the reason someone found hope again. Those memories no longer appeared ordinary. They revealed a pattern of quiet strength that had always existed beneath the surface. My child, your soulmate continued walking until they arrived at a local farmer's market where neighbors greeted one another with warmth that had clearly grown through years of shared mornings. A fruit vendor noticed an elderly customer counting coins carefully before choosing only a few apples. Without saying a word, the vendor added several more apples to the bag and smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. The customer thanked them warmly before walking away, never realizing that such a small gesture had become another unforgettable lesson for someone standing nearby. Watching this scene, your soulmate realized that kindness is most beautiful when it protects another person's dignity. It gives without making someone feel small. It serves without asking to be admired. Once again they thought of you. They remembered the quiet ways you had supported others without drawing attention to yourself. They remembered how naturally you celebrated another person's success, how willingly you offered your time when someone needed help, and how your honesty remained steady even when taking an easier path might have benefited you. Those memories continued building upon one another until your soulmate finally admitted what they had been reluctant to say aloud. They admired not only what you had done but also who you consistently chose to become. Later that afternoon they wandered into a small art gallery displaying photographs of everyday life. There were no famous landmarks or dramatic scenes. Instead, the walls were filled with images of ordinary people sharing ordinary moments. A grandfather teaching his granddaughter to bake bread, neighbors repairing a fence together after a storm, friends laughing over simple meals, healthcare workers comforting anxious patients, volunteers planting trees, musicians performing in quiet parks, teachers encouraging students, and strangers helping one another during unexpected moments of difficulty. Beneath one photograph was a short sentence that captured your soulmate's attention. The ordinary moments become extraordinary when they are remembered with gratitude. They stood silently before those words for several minutes because they realized that gratitude changes the way we see everything. It reveals beauty that was always present but often unnoticed. Suddenly every memory involving you seemed brighter than before. They remembered your reassuring smile during uncertain times, your willingness to forgive instead of holding on to resentment, your habit of thanking people whose efforts often went unseen, and your steady compassion that never depended on recognition. Looking back, they understood that those moments had quietly shaped the way people felt long after the conversations themselves had ended. As evening approached, your soulmate returned to the riverside where this journey of reflection had begun. The setting sun painted the water with shades of gold and amber while birds crossed the sky in graceful silence. Families enjoyed peaceful walks along the path, children laughed as they skipped stones across the water, and an elderly musician softly played familiar melodies that drifted through the evening air. Your soulmate realized that nothing about the world itself had changed. The river still flowed, the trees still swayed in the breeze, and the people continued living ordinary lives. The only thing that had changed was the way they saw it. They finally understood that life's greatest treasures are often hidden inside everyday faithfulness. Returning home, they opened the notebook once more and carefully filled another page. They wrote about the mother encouraging her son to begin again, the fruit vendor quietly giving more than expected, the photographs celebrating ordinary lives, and every gentle reminder that goodness rarely announces itself. Then they wrote about you again, describing your patience, integrity, generosity, humility, compassion, gratitude, and the quiet consistency that had inspired more people than you would probably ever know. Looking across the room, they noticed 11:11 glowing softly on the digital clock. Earlier that day they had smiled after receiving receipt number 222, and while walking through town they had passed a building displaying 444 above its entrance. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as gentle reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate smiled and quietly asked themselves, "Have I expressed gratitude before the opportunity passes? Have I recognized the quiet people whose kindness has shaped my life? Have I become someone who leaves behind peace instead of worry, hope instead of discouragement, and encouragement instead of criticism?" Those reflections filled the room with a deep sense of peace. Before gently closing the notebook, they rested their hand on its cover and whispered one final sentence into the stillness of the evening, knowing that the next chapter would finally reveal everything their heart had struggled to express. "Tomorrow I will tell you why I can no longer wait to speak, because the greatest discovery was never about finding someone extraordinary. It was about finally recognizing the extraordinary goodness that had been quietly present all along." Don't scroll. Listen carefully. This message is for you. Your heart needs to hear this right now. My child, your soulmate gently places the notebook on the table for what feels like the final time, yet their heart tells them there is still one more truth waiting to be spoken. Every page they have written has brought them closer to understanding why they have felt such an overwhelming urgency to reach out. At first, they believed they were searching for answers about someone else, but now they realize this journey has also revealed something about themselves. They have learned how easily gratitude can be delayed, how often appreciation remains unspoken, and how quickly ordinary moments pass without anyone recognizing their true value. They no longer want to make that mistake. As the morning sun fills the room, they quietly step outside once more, determined to notice the beauty that has always surrounded them. The town awakens just as it has every other day. Shopkeepers lift their shutters, cyclists ride toward work, children laugh on their way to school, and neighbors exchange familiar greetings. Yet everything feels different because they have changed. Every smile now seems more meaningful. Every act of patience carries greater weight. Every ordinary conversation feels like a reminder that life is built from thousands of small moments rather than a handful of dramatic ones. Walking through the town square, they notice a florist carefully replacing wilted flowers with fresh ones before customers arrive. No one has asked for the display to be beautiful, but the florist quietly believes that people deserve to begin their day surrounded by something uplifting. A little farther along, they see a cafe owner preparing an extra breakfast for a regular customer who has recently been struggling, placing it on the table with nothing more than a warm smile. Nearby, a bus driver waits a few extra seconds so an elderly passenger can safely reach the door before continuing the route. None of these people know they are becoming part of someone else's story, yet every quiet decision reminds your soulmate of the same lesson. Goodness does not seek attention. It simply appears wherever someone chooses compassion over convenience. As they continue walking, they arrive at a small community park where volunteers are repairing playground equipment before children arrive later in the day. One volunteer carefully sands rough wooden edges while another tightens loose bolts on a swing. Curious, your soulmate asks why they dedicate so much time to work that will probably go unnoticed. One volunteer smiles and replies, "The children may never know who fixed this, but they'll know it was safe enough to enjoy." Those words settle deeply into their heart because they reveal something profound. Some of the greatest gifts are never recognized by the people who receive them, yet they still change lives. Instantly your soulmate remembers the countless ways you quietly strengthened those around you. They remember how you encouraged someone after a difficult disappointment, how you patiently listened without trying to control the conversation, how you remained dependable even when life became complicated, and how your kindness never seemed to depend upon whether anyone noticed it. Looking back, they realize that your influence was never loud, but it was lasting. My child, the afternoon brings another unexpected lesson. While passing through a local market, your soulmate notices a child accidentally dropping a small bag of fruit onto the ground. Apples and oranges roll in every direction. Before the child can panic, strangers from nearby stalls stop what they are doing, laugh gently, gather every piece of fruit, and help refill the bag. Within moments everyone returns to their work as though nothing unusual had happened. The child smiles with relief, thanks each person, and continues home. Watching this simple moment, your soulmate understands that the world is often held together by ordinary people choosing cooperation instead of indifference. They remember times when you quietly brought people together during disagreements instead of adding to conflict. They remember how you looked for understanding before judgment and how your calm words often restored peace when tension filled the room. Those memories become impossible to ignore because together they reveal the kind of person you have consistently chosen to be. As evening approaches, your soulmate wanders toward the riverside one final time. The familiar bench waits beneath the old tree where so many of their reflections have taken place. The river moves steadily, just as it always has, reminding them that time never stops. Families stroll along the pathway, friends sit together sharing stories, an elderly musician softly plays gentle melodies nearby, and the golden light of sunset dances across the water. Sitting there in peaceful silence, your soulmate finally understands why they have felt such urgency. It is not because something mysterious happened overnight. It is because they have discovered how precious it is to recognize goodness while it is still present. Too often people wait until years have passed before expressing appreciation. Too often gratitude arrives after opportunities have already disappeared. They quietly promise themselves they will no longer allow meaningful words to remain trapped inside their heart. Returning home, they open the notebook to the final blank page and begin writing with steady hands. They write about the florist brightening a stranger's morning, the cafe owner offering quiet generosity, the bus driver choosing patience, the volunteers repairing the playground, the strangers helping the child gather scattered fruit, and every ordinary person whose unseen choices quietly made the world kinder. Then they write about you one final time. They describe your honesty when shortcuts seemed easier, your patience during difficult conversations, your humility when recognition was offered, your gratitude for simple blessings, your willingness to forgive, your dependable character, and your quiet compassion that left people feeling lighter than before. Every page now points toward the same truth: real greatness is not measured by applause but by the peace a person leaves behind in the lives of others. Looking toward the digital clock across the room, they notice 11:11 glowing softly. Earlier in the day they smiled after receiving receipt number 222, and during their walk they passed a building displaying 444 above its entrance. Many people enjoy treating repeating numbers like these as gentle reminders to pause and reflect. Your soulmate smiles and lets those moments inspire a final series of questions. Have I thanked the people who quietly shaped my life? Have I chosen kindness when it mattered most? Have I become someone whose presence brings comfort instead of fear, hope instead of discouragement, and understanding instead of judgment? Those reflections fill the room with a deep sense of gratitude. Gently closing the notebook, they realize the message they have longed to share has never been about an impossible sign or a hidden secret. It has always been about recognizing the extraordinary power of ordinary goodness before it is overlooked. They rest their hand upon the cover one final time and whisper into the quiet evening, "If I reach out now, it will not be because I fear tomorrow. It will be because today has reminded me that gratitude, kindness, and sincere words are gifts that should never be left waiting."